Gretchen Whitmer, she got a little acting a fool going on.
Oh
You
boy.
know, because when you're bored, you got to pass more gun control laws. You have to.
Yeah. In an election
That's a
year, you got to do
rule.
something. Yeah.
You got to do something, and that's a very key point as we transition to this next segment. Got to do something. So let me walk you through a few things here, Tim, and then we'll break this down because something doesn't quite sit right with a lot of people in this. But let me show the people of Second Legacy what she just did. Dr. Button Pusher, this is number 3. Michigan continues overhaul of gun laws with extended firearm ban for misdemeanor domestic violence. Okay, so that's what she's done on a high level, and that's an article from the AP. Let's dive into number 4. Let me show you what a misdemeanor actually is. Misdemeanors typically include nonviolent crimes like shoplifting, reckless driving, simple assault, or drug possession for first-time offenders. So that's what a misdemeanor would be. And now let me show you what federal law says about misdemeanors with domestic violence, and then we'll kind of back into this, okay? This is number 5. If the person has no more than one such conviction and is not otherwise prohibited, the person shall not be disqualified from shipping, transport, possession, receipt, or purchase of a firearm if 5 years have elapsed from the latter of the judgment of conviction or the completion of the person's custodial or supervisory sentence. So basically, you've got a 5-year penalty as a federal law to be involved in physical harm misdemeanor or violent misdemeanors. You lose your gun rights if you're convicted. That is a
If you're
federal law.
convicted, yes. Right.
If you are convicted. Now, this is kind of where this gets a little bit weird for me, Tim. We just ran through misdemeanor. We just ran through felony misdemeanor misdemeanor on a federal level, and yet Michigan is now implementing this on a state level. My initial question to you is, why would she do this if it's already federal law that applies to Michigan by itself already?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's politics. This was
No, stop
low-hanging
it.
fruit. There's something they could push through. Like, look, it already exists at the federal level. Let's just extend it by 3 years. We should be able to push this through. It's reasonable gun safety. And then we can
Right.
get a victory in an election year and, make old Biden look good. So this is the second most comprehensive gun control package in 30 years, folks.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? So my initial read on this, when this first dropped, and I don't remember if you and I were texting about it or not. I think we were talking about it this morning.
Dropped and plopped. Anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead.
My biggest point on this was, why is this being talked about as if it's something new or novel, as if it's something that they just innovated outside the box? And Gretchen Whitmer and the Democrats in Michigan are going around pounding their chest of, look what we did, Giffords.org and Every Time for Gun Safety, Moms Man Action. They're all out there pounding their chest about, look at what just happened in Michigan. And I'm it's one of those things where you're like in a twilight zone. This is already federal law. What are you celebrating? Like
I know.
this is already existing law and has been for decades. And they're passing it off as a state law victory. And I'm like,
Yep. And they're going to
what am
pretend
I
like
missing?
this is all brand new territory. Like, look what we've accomplished. And
right.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. I mean, if you listen to some of the things that she said here. This is number 7, Doctor. So Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed legislation Monday, so she did this yesterday, that prohibits individuals convicted of misdemeanor related to domestic violence from possessing firearms for at least 8-year period. So there is a difference of 8 to 5 years, but that's the only difference. State law currently includes firearm restrictions for those with felonies related to domestic abuse, but no law had existed for misdemeanor domestic abuse. So here's what she said. These bills are based on a simple idea. If you have been found guilty in court for violently assaulting your partner, you should not be able to access a deadly weapon that you could use to further threaten, harm, or kill them. It's just common sense. Well, you know what else is common sense, Tim? Is having a federal law that already exists, and then you pass it off as a state. It's so mind-boggling to me. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me when California and New York passed laws about having unregistered fully automatic NFA items, where it's like, well, machine guns are illegal now in the state of New York. They've been illegal since 1934. Like it doesn't. You can't have 50 caliber machine guns anymore.
We're going to pass a law banning Glock switches off Amazon. Yeah, it's like
exactly. What are you talking? That's a perfect example. The Glock switches. It's like, well, we're gonna outlaw Glock switches because the feds did it already. So why can't we do it? And
but this is what they do
so hard, dude.
But when they can't get anything done that would otherwise actually be something new, they can't get it done. So they go after this type of stuff. And then they claim
Mm-hmm.
victory. And then the propaganda ministries out there,
Yep.
MSNBC and CBS and the rest of them, CNN, they're all out there going, look what great things are doing in Michigan. And they won't tell
Right.
the viewers, like, yeah, this is
This,
not news.
this is
But
not news, right?
hey, they got to amp it up, man. We got to reinstall Joe Biden as president. So we're going to show that we've
Got
accomplished something.
got to do something. Got to do something. It just it smacks so much of manipulation, and we're going to get to the downside of this in 1 second. We're not making light of this like it's not a thing. We're going to get to this in a second because the most important point is they're duplicating federal law. They're copying and pasting. Okay, but this is an important piece. Look at number 8 here because this is new stuff they put in law this year. Legislation implementing red flag laws, stricter background checks, and safe storage laws were all signed by Whitmer earlier this year. So the entire point here, and to what Tim just said that's so crucial, they've already implemented red flag laws. There are no federal red flag laws. They implemented universal background checks, and they implemented mandatory safe storage laws. All 3 of those things are not duplicated at the federal level. Those are new threats. Those are innovations. Those are infringements on the Second Amendment, of which they just thought up because they wanted to, because apparently people in Michigan wanted abortion rights that bad, and then that's the byproduct, right? But it smacks so hard of, well, we did these things already, and we can't really go much further without getting in trouble, so let's just copy a federal law. It's just,
I know. And all the things that they passed, if you take a look in, say, 5 years at the numbers, guess what's not going to change?
yeah,
Nothing.
not going to do anything.
Nothing's going to
Nothing
change. And so what are they going to do? They're going to say,
Correct.
well, look, we've done all this stuff and these people are still misusing their guns. So we got to come back to the table and talk about this. We just need sensible gun safety laws. Well, everything you've passed hasn't done jack because you're trying to legislate morality. Right. And so basically what you're saying is, without saying it, is just give us the guns. We're just going to keep incrementally chipping away at your rights. And it's not going to have any effect. Just like the assault weapons ban they're all clamoring for. The one from 1994 did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it didn't do anything.
Boy, we're going to do it again.
But boy, are we getting it again. Right. But, yeah, but now this is the part where it comes full circle, though. And this is where you and I had a kind of a more passionate conversation around this stuff. They are trying to duplicate and create new ways to take gun rights from people that they would, and I'm devil's advocate, that they would deem a threat to themselves or others. This is in their world. The way that they are viewing this is, well, you could potentially be a threat, so we need a mechanism to take guns away from you because you can be a threat to someone or yourself, right? That's their mentality. That's their verbiage. You wouldn't disagree with that, right? That's pretty much
true. Yeah,
their modus operandi, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But what about something that's very familiar when you're doing commercial fishing? What about the unintentional catch? What about the people who the system has been abused and other people who are innocent are getting their gun rights taken? For example, with a state law that mimics federal law, the state now has ability to basically choose to charge or not versus the federal. Well, what if someone decides he did this or she did this, so now they're going to lose their gun rights through the entire process? Red flag laws. They did this, he said this about that, or the other. He said, she said, you lose your gun rights. The point that I want to make here is, while this is stupid and the duplicitous nature and manipulation of this from copying and pasting federal law is just that, duplicitous and manipulation, there's also unintentional consequences between the red flag laws, the misdemeanor stuff, and the checks and safe storage, that you're going to catch people who did nothing wrong because others abuse the system. You're creating a system that can be abused, which impacts people's rights. That's a massive part of this.
Yep. And look, I mean, the state laws vary, and I've probably told this story before, but, I have a very close friend of mine who was engaged. He broke off the engagement. His fiancée was enraged. She made a false police report, which she admitted later was false, but it took him almost a decade to get his gun rights back. He wasn't convicted of anything. And so, and then you had the person making the accusation put in writing in an email that it was all fabricated. Did that make a difference to the court? No. Matter of fact, he had to go to court. He had to go to court multiple times, fight with the state of Indiana to get his rights restored.
Right.
And so this is what they do. And I know from being involved with a gun shop that many people that come in, at least in our state, because our state will, many times the court will automatically apply an order of protection against the male in a divorce. And if your attorney isn't doing their job, they won't even know that order's been applied. So when they show up at the gun store to buy a new gun, they have no idea. They're not violent. They've not done anything. As a matter of fact, their spouse hasn't even requested it, but they're under an order of protection. They can't buy a firearm. And now they have to go through
Right.
all these legal hoops, retain legal services, and all this stuff just to get their rights restored because a judge made a decision, or
Mm-hmm.
somebody, your spouse or significant other is angry and they just want to take your gun rights away to spite you. That would never happen.
Right. And
But they
that's the
don't.
risk. That's the unintentional consequence piece.
Yeah, and I think that happens more frequently than actual criminals getting
Oh,
stopped by these types of things.
I
It's
would
pure
I would
harassment.
completely agree. I
Yeah.
would completely agree. And just for funsies, because you know how I like me some funsies, Tim. I'm
Mhm.
going to put up number 9 just to prove the point here. Federal law already prohibits those charged with felonies or misdemeanors related to domestic violence from purchasing or possessing a gun.
Mhm.
But advocates have pushed for state level laws that they say can be better enforced and won't be threatened by future Supreme Court rulings. So you're saying that the feds aren't doing their job and you think that the Supreme Court is limited in affecting state law? Hashtag Bruin, hashtag Heller. Like,
I
what are
know.
you
They're
smoking?
idiots. I know. It's like they just got here yesterday. But
Oh my
whatever.
goodness.